Good morning. My name is Martina Douglas, and I am the Program Coordinator of the Equity and Diversity Office at UTM, also referred to as the EDO. Thanks to everyone for joining us in person and online to engage in critical discussions on the topic of complexities of Blackness, stories told, strategies at this year's Black History Symposium, organized by the University of Toronto's Black History 365 Committee and the Anti-Racism and Cultural Diversity Office in the Division of Human Resources and Equity. Whew, that was a mouthful. We are particularly excited to be joined by many community members, including Dr. Denise O'Neill Green, Vice President of the Equity and Community Inclusion from Ryerson University. To commence the program, I would like to ground the space with a land acknowledgement. It is common at many events across campus to read out a land acknowledgement. Acknowledging the land is an act of reconciliation to recognize the land of the Indigenous people who called this land home before the arrival of settlers, and to acknowledge the many Indigenous peoples who still live, work, and learn here. I am a settler. My family migrated from the Caribbean to Canada, to the land on which the University of Toronto operates and where each of us today live, work, or learn. I feel grateful to be with you all on this land today, which has for the thousands of years been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. I am also grateful for the traditional ways of learning that existed here for millennia. And to my Indigenous friends and colleagues at U of T for teaching me about mutual responsibility and the importance of belonging and shared experiences. I hope that you join me in expressing gratitude to have the opportunity to learn together today in this community and on this territory. At this time, I would like to invite everyone to stand, if you are able to do so, to sing the Canadian National Anthem, followed immediately by the Black National Anthem that will be performed by Sherry Ann Bailey.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all our sons' command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God, keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let all rejoice, sing, rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us, facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Let us march on till victory is won. Thank you.
You may all be seated. Thank you. Thank you, Sherry Ann. I would now like to invite Dr. Joki Wayne, Professor and Chair of Social Justice Education in the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, to deliver remarks and to introduce the keynote speaker.
It's good to see all of you, but as I was seated there, I felt that there is a need for us to pour a libation, and especially when water poured twice. That was, Jockey, you have to do something. The ancestors understand. We don't have the ground, but this is part of the universe. So I'm going to speak in my language to say hello to the ancestors and to invite them here today. Mwenengera, okagoko, okoroenatu, na miario yondera tukora twinayo, rogamanatu. Na aria mathire mbere yetu, makorwo mainatu. Thank you for allowing me to do that. Thank you, the organizing committee, to have allowed me to say a few words before I introduce Aina-Nia, she who has purpose. Did you know that's her name? She who has purpose is the meaning of her name. Thank you for all of you who have come this morning. It's quite an interesting morning. It's a great morning, and we are all bright and ready to share our stories and our conversations. I would like to start my few remarks. I would like to start with 3 quotes, one by Bell Hooks, and then by Fanon, and the last one by Malcolm X. That we evoke here in all of us, the we that we evoke, Black people, all people who are daily bombarded by a powerful colonizing whiteness that seduces us away from ourselves, that negates that there is beauty to be found in any form of Blackness or any form of marginalization. That is not imitation of whiteness. That is by Bell Hooks. By Fanon. I am Black. I am Black. I am in total fusion with the world, in sympathetic affinity with the earth, losing my identity in the heart of the cosmos. I am Black, not because of a curse, but because my skin has been able to capture all the cosmetic energy. I am truly a drop of the sun under the earth. I am Black. And by Malcolm X, freedom is essential to life itself. Freedom is essential to the development of the human being. If we don't have freedom, we will never expect justice or equality. Only after we have freedom do justice and equality become a reality. My next 3 minutes, I'll talk about, just mention 3 things. Complexity, complex, Blackness, black, self, you. When we talk about complexity, it means, or when we say complex, it's difficult to understand. It's layered, it's intricate, it's mysterious, it's multiplicity, and it needs solving. Complexity of blackness does not need solving. Blackness and black. How did we arrive at the blackness as, how do we arrive at blackness as a holistic being? How can we be holistic as we define ourselves? What do we mean by black? What do we mean by blackness? When I was thinking about my few remarks, what it reminded me is black, the way it is texturized. Our blackness has become a text. We are constantly being read within the complexity of blackness and also being read out of our own identities. We have been objectified, we have become research object, we have been categorized, we have been analyzed, and the conclusions have been made about our blackness. There is a constant gaze as we live our lives, constantly being defined and gazed at, making their own conclusion on what to focus on us. Do I focus on our jacket? Do I focus on her face? Do I focus on her hair or her nose or her lips? What do I focus on? And the focus that the gazer decides to focus on, that becomes the center of conversation. We need to change that. We need to deflate that. I'll say again, the gazer is constantly picking pieces of you in order to make sense of your being. The silencing of a black person, the black history, the black being is painful. It's really painful. The erasure of the black person, the black body, the black month, the black everything. Yes, it's a black month, but there's no fell on our only day that we are going to speak. The self and you and me. Let's stop complaining, honestly, because it's your responsibility to define your blackness, your being, yourself. It's your responsibility to correct the miseducation of the black bodies. It is your responsibility to write your history, to correct that history. Don't expect anybody else to do it. It is upon ourselves and yourself to decide to accept and not to be accepted. It is you to define what blackness you want to put it on yourself. It is our collective responsibility as people of African ancestry to pause and to rethink what blackness is. How would we like our blackness portrayed? We have to decide that. There are lots of gaps to be filled with conversations through telling our stories and believing in our stories. As people of African ancestry, no one will write your true history, your true story, your real story. No one will share your true and real strategies of coming up with a blackness that speaks to each one of you. There'll always be that person who wants to perpetuate the single story about you as a person embodied within blackness of complexities. Let us liberate our mind, our bodies, our souls, our blackness in order to be free. I'm going back to Malcolm X's quote. In order to have freedom, freedom to define ourselves, to name ourselves, and to say emphatically, we know who we are. There is no confusion. Hence, there is no complexity in our blackness. Thank you. It is, therefore, my pleasure to introduce to you a great person who has purpose, who will take us through the complexities of blackness, tell our stories, and share some strategies. So I'll just share a few, because she's a great person, about Aina-Nia, she who has purpose. Aina-Nia Grant is the Director, Community Resources Section of the City of Toronto. I almost said University of Toronto. It would be great to have you here. Prior to this, she served as a manager of the City of Toronto Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit. She was the lead project consultant for Confronting Anti-Black Racism initiative that began in 2016 to address anti-Black racism in Toronto. Aina-Nia was integral to the creation of the 5-year plan, that is Toronto Action Plan, to confront anti-Black racism, which was approved, thank you, by University of Toronto, by City of Toronto in December 20, I think there is a message there. In December, no, it's multi-layered, you understand. In December 2017. Joining the city, Aina-Nia was a leadership development trainer and life coach and consultant for issues within racialized communities, particularly issues of gender, racial equity, and African indigenous practices. There are African indigenous practices. She is a coach for that. Aina-Nia is the founder of Sacred Women International and was named, do you want to hear that? She was named one of the 100 accomplished Black women, Canadian women, for 2018. We can clap for that. Yeah, it's a big accomplishment. Thank you. And in 2016, she was named one of the top Black women to watch in Canada. Let's clap again. Yeah. Thank you. She has been recognized by Ontario government for her contributions to community, and in 2015 and 2008 was nominated as one of the Toronto's most inspiring women. She has not only received recognition from Canada, but she has received recognition from the US media. Her documentary film, Remembering Power, premiered at 2018 Parliament of World Religion in Toronto. If that is not enough, Aina-Nia is featured in the web series Souls of Women. Please join me in welcoming Aina-Nia, she who has purpose.
I love me some Jokey. So Jokey knew me when my name wasn't Aina-Nia, when I was still carrying the slave name. So we go a way back. Thank you, Jokey, for that beautiful introduction. Thank you so much, everyone. And greetings, Black people. Yes. Greetings, allies of Black people. Yes. Greetings to even the critics that might be here. Greetings, everybody. I want to thank UFT Anti-Racism Cultural Diversity Office for inviting me to share with you today. It is truly an honor to be the keynote speaker. I will try to stay with my script because I had sent it for translation. I'll try to stay as close to it as possible, but you know, she did pour libation, so I don't know what will come out. But you know, I want to acknowledge the land that I stand on. I know that we've done that before, but I do want to join you in acknowledging the bones of our indigenous people who are so kind. They've been so kind to allow us to be here. As a Black woman, though, an African descendant, I also want to pay homage to the 12.5 million Africans who were captured through the transatlantic slave trade, and the 2 million who did not survive crossing the Middle Passage, the 10.2 million or more who were sold into the Americas, and the 383,000 who settled in North America, including right here in Toronto. I pay homage to the ancestors of those of African descent for their resilience, their ingenuity, their resourcefulness, and their tenacity. We live through that. It is the reason that we're able to carry on this fight for equity, for Black liberation, and Black History 365 today, as we've been doing for centuries. I want to acknowledge all who have gone before me with the intention of Black liberation. I'm trying to stay away from the fight for Black liberation, because that just feels too hard on my body, you know? So I'm saying the intention is Black liberation. I pay respect and honor for all the ways that we have expressed activism for equality and justice, because we do it in different ways, and we have to acknowledge and honor the different ways that we do it. You know, we do it at the kitchen table. We do it in the streets, through marches. We do it in the lecture halls at the academy, in the boardrooms of corporate Canada, at community spaces, through deputations at City Hall, at meetings with ministers on Parliament Hill and Queen's Park. We do it in different ways, and we must acknowledge and honor the different ways that we do it. So there is a City of Toronto Confronting Anti-Black Racism unit, because of all that I've said before, and because of you. Please clap yourself. Because this didn't come because somebody decided that, oh my goodness, let's do this. No, no, no. It came because of years and years and years of activism, because of all the work that is being done over the last 4 decades and more. There has been numerous reports on the plight of our people and what should be done about it. Governments on all levels and of various political stripes have paid lip service to address the soul-destroying and dream-crushing anti-Black racism that our people have faced for centuries. More recently, we have seen a series of activities, including the recognition by the federal government of the United Nations Decade for People of African Descent. 3 years after the declaration, but it was done, 2015. And in 2019, the federal budget had $25 million for over 5 years allocated to Black communities to address anti-Black racism. I don't know the details and the conditions attached to these funds and even the groups that have gotten them, but there is a contribution. So there you have it. We have $25 million over 5 years to Black community. The question is, how are we using it? And in 2017, the Ontario Liberal government introduced and passed Ontario's and Canada's first anti-racism legislation. As part of this initiative, an anti-racism directorate was created, and along with that, various subcommittees to put in place to guide the work, and that included a subcommittee on anti-Black racism. In spite of some skeptics, there was hope in the community, in the Black community, that some systemic and structural changes would take place through this initiative, and at least within structures, policies, and practices of the Ontario government. So fast track, a year later or so, a new government was elected. And the subcommittees were the first to be disbanded. And the directorate's work scaled back. And at this point, things have gone very silent, don't you think? So what are we doing? What are we saying? We've been silent. Fast track, so closer to home and to my work at the City of Toronto. As you heard before, there was a decision made to put the issue of anti-Black racism on the public agenda. So today, the City of Toronto has a council-mandated action plan to address anti-Black racism as a government. And so far, the only government that we are aware of across North America that has such a plan. Additionally, the City of Toronto is the second municipality in Canada to acknowledge the International Decade for People of African Descent and call upon its public servants, especially its leaders, to make Toronto a city that actively advances the United Nations goal for this decade to be one of justice, recognition, and development for its residents of African descent. The commitment and action of the municipal government to address anti-Black racism, as I said before, did not happen magically. This is a result of Black people power, consistent resilience, consistent ingenuity and wisdom and tenacity of Black people in Toronto, especially over the last decade, advocacy and activism to address the impacts of anti-Black racism on the bodies and lives of Black people. Much of this work of Black resistance for belonging and equity goes as far back as the founding Anti-Slavery Society in 1851 to the establishment of BATSY. Everybody remember BATSY, yes? In 1988. And of course, Black Lives Matter Toronto uprising in the spring of 2016. Almost 200 years of Black people power, Black activism, 41 years of recommendations and reports saying, government, we're suffering. And this is how you can address it. I say that because it's important that we understand and that we take ownership for the confronting anti-Black racism unit that exists at the city today. It is you. And I know I'm stressing that because I want you to understand that. So in 2016, here is how it began. The city's social development division was asked to look at a way to address anti-Black racism in Toronto. So, and the wisdom of this is that we knew that there was no need to go back out and ask Black people what to do. There was reports and recommendations, 41 years of them. Instead, we turned to Black community and asked for some very specific things. Every report, whether we looked at the report in 1979 or in 1986 or in 1993, they were saying the same thing. Here were the themes, not surprising to you. Children and youth development, policing and the justice system need to be fixed, job opportunities and income supports for Black people, community engagement and Black leadership need to build capacity on that, and health and community services that was responsive to the Black people and to our culture. So there were consultations with over 1,000 Black Torontonians between January and March 2017, of course, right in the middle of winter. Small kitchen table-like conversation about what is relevant today based on all of those recommendations, what should be prioritized, and if the city was to do something about it, what would it look like? Those priorities were operationalized in a report. We're put in a report to be operationalized, and now we have this 5-year report. Please note that this is the first 5-year action plan, but we need you. Just in case I get to say that later, I want to say that to you now. It is the first 5-year action plan, because we often get asked, so what happens after 5 years? Well, by 4th year, we should be putting another action plan together. That's like a 10-year action plan, yeah? Or a 20-year would make better sense. City Council approved it, as you know, and the difference this time is that community demanded in this report that there be a budget attached to this. So for resources, and that there be a unit developed at the city with Black people who were qualified, both in skills and life experience, to implement this plan. And that the community was able to hold the city accountable for the full implementation of the plan. Very smart. I think that is what is making the difference. These particular pieces, resources, the people who know what to do the thing, and accountability. And so here we are. But I'll tell you this much. Like all diverse and complex communities, responses from our Black communities about the government's response to this issue varies from absolute skepticism to cautious optimism and reasonably positive hope. And all of that, I think, is valuable. And of course, As the unit, we also deal with the call-outs and degradation of our people from our people, which only hurts and never heals. So today we have this permanent unit working with all city divisions, city agencies and commissions, the Toronto Police Services, and most recently the Toronto Transit Commission, TTC. And there is currently discussion for the unit to work with TCHC as well. The unit is a unit of 5 plus 2 Black interns that rotate every 5 months to make sure that we're introducing our Black young people who are absolutely brilliant to to government. And then we have 12 members of the Black community who keeps us accountable, and that is created in a very African-centered way. So we have elders and youth and stakeholders. We also have a Black staff network. And I know for sure that the Confronting Anti-Black Racism unit is making a difference. When asked how the unit is making a difference and how is it impacting the municipal government, we can confidently say that the CABR unit is contributing to culture change at the City of Toronto. Decision makers and service providers are being enabled to recognize everyday barriers faced by Black Torontonians, to recognize it and not to sweep it under the table as, you know, what are we talking about? That's all done. The city is enhancing and creating policies, programs, and services to remove these barriers, which benefits, I believe, not only Black people and black staff and residents of the city, but all other Torontonians who are marginalized. Because we know when we address the issues of those who are most marginalized, we're in fact addressing the issues of all, right? And we're making the place better. It's simple. But Black people have been doing that for years, right? All the equity policies that we see, it started with us. We've been doing that for years. In May 2019, we presented a report to council that was again approved, that showed that 28% of all the action plans within the 5-year plan were either completed or had started. A large portion of the work is taken up. I just want to share with you, for those of you who are thinking about how do you implement this and operationalize this, there are 5 of us, and a large portion of the work is taken up in consultation. So we've become quite the consultant to the divisions and the commissions and agencies as they are requesting for us to review their policies, programs, protocols, and anything new that they may be designing. I think that's a good thing. That's a good thing because that didn't exist before, and that's a good thing because now our voices get to be heard. And we can say to divisions, let's pull a group of Black experts together for you to do this or that. Or have you checked here, have you checked that? We can say there is absolutely no anti-Black racism lens in this document or this report or this policy. And because we're legislated, because we're council approved, we actually have the backing to say, I am telling you got to do this because it's council approved. And why should you do it? Because it's council approved. And so if you don't do it, please tell me what we should put in the next report to council to say why you haven't done it. That's been a big piece of our strategy because I think it works better when it's on paper. It works better when it's in the policy. I want to tell you that between May last year and December, 9,000 people throughout the city, division, commissions, and agency were participated in learning sessions about anti-Black racism. And what our focus is on understanding how to analyze your policies and practices and programs to ensure that it has an anti-Black racism lens. We do not spend too much time on you have to change your heart because it is what it is, but we do know that there is a policy, there are policies that dictate that what you do to serve Black people have to look better. Right? So that is our focus in our learning program. It really is a little different. We look at the 80 recommendations from community, and that is what we base everything on. How are you doing? How are you doing? And you're responsible to do this. And so we're teaching people how to recognize anti-Black racism and how to address it and how to make sure that they're using the analysis in all that they're doing. The feedback has been surprisingly good, and no surprise at the resistance, of course. And I want to show you a very brief video that we did on our first year. It is important as Black people that we document what we're doing, right? So reports are good. We have it on paper. We're using all of the medium to make sure that we're documenting our work. If we should not be here at any time, we want to make sure that we're leaving legacy. So I'm going to ask, somebody's going to help us. Okay, great, thank you.
We come from a long legacy of Black organizing, Black liberation, Black freedom work.
There is no other municipality in North America that has done this at a government level.
The only way that we can truly conquer anti-Black racism is when we realize that there is power in one. Together we stand, divided we fall.
I have to take you back to early spring 2016, where Black Lives Matter movement really gained focus and presence in Toronto. They were in the media, it was everywhere. It just could not be quieted. Shut it down! Shut it down! Black people overall was just tired. We were tired of it because of the killing of our Black people by police in Toronto. And we know that it was years and years of saying no more, no more, no more. So what it is that the city needed to do was to hear from Black people in the city and all Black people and to do something about it, to address anti-Black racism and to name it. And so that's how this started.
As much as we pride ourselves in being one of the best places in the world in terms of respect for each other and lack of discrimination and racism, there are still serious issues to be addressed. And those are some of the issues that Black Lives Matters raises, and I respect the fact that they do that.
December 5th, 2017 was historic. Historic not just for Black people in Toronto, but historic for all people in Toronto. It's a long time coming, but it came.
Too often, what we have done, who we are, what we are, how we've contributed, has been erased, silenced, marginalized, overlooked. This moment, it moves against this trend of invisibilizing Blackness and highlights Blackness in a way that's authentic to Black people.
So we looked at the 41 years of reports, recommendation, research, all of it saying exactly almost the same things. And we took that to the Black communities. We talked to Black youth, Black seniors, Black people in the LGBTQ community, Black fathers, Black women, Caribbean Black people, African people from the continent. We talked to everybody, as many as we could get, right? To see, when we looked at those recommendations, what was relevant today. And so those 80 actions came from that.
What was important in the development of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism plan was this notion that we must work closely as partners with the City of Toronto from Black communities, and the mechanism that made sense was creating this partnership and accountability circle.
The role involves providing feedback and assessments and reports to City Council around how the action plan has been developed and implemented and measured and tracked. So in reality, it is not just to work with the other members of PAC, but to work with the community, work with the unit, and ensuring that the plan implementation is successful and effective in meeting its goals.
So when we first started to implement the action plan, the response from a lot of our partners was really a lot of great interest. We had our first sit-down meeting with different city departments, talk about where they were mentioned in the action plan, to remind them where they were mentioned, to talk about what those actions actually mean, and then to work with them on developing activities, like what will they do to make those actions come to life.
I first came into contact with the Cabaret unit earlier this year in February. My director, Nicole Welch, requested that we roll out the Confronting Anti-Black Racism training to our staff and management.
Toronto Employment and Social Services engaged 60% of their leadership in the conversations through the development of the strategy itself.
This was rolled out to help make our services more accessible and responsive to Black communities and Black families in particular. And so I think staff were really excited to be able to start exploring that and looking at ways in which we can critically look at what we're doing, but then also with an eye towards what can we do better.
One of the issues what we've identified in our division doing work around diversity and inclusion is that we do have a strain of anti-Black racism that exists in our division. And we wanted to be addressing it proactively. And so we have worked closely with the CABR unit on a regular basis to consult with them, to help understand the issues, to understand our role in implementing the action plan. And to ensure that we are doing the work in a good way.
The difference with the Confronting Anti-Black Racism strategy is that it confronts anti-Black racism specifically, and we're calling it out. And I think that that's a very, very cool and needed and bold shift that the city needed.
When I have divisions calling us and asking us to look at their policies and to comb through their policies to make sure that it has that an anti-Black racism lens have been applied, that's amazing, because it's the policies and programs that we need to shift.
Diversity. Does the initiative engage with the diversity of Toronto's Black communities?
Collaboration. Does the initiative prioritize collaboration between Toronto's communities of African descent?
Relationship building. Are the relationships we're building intentional and reciprocal?
Accountability. Does this initiative demonstrate accountability to communities of African descent?
Transparency. Is the initiative transparent for Black Torontonians?
Accessibility. Does the initiative use accessible language to communicate with Black Torontonians?
Creativity and openness. Is the initiative creative and open enough to serve the needs of people of African descent?
Sustainability. Is the initiative sustainable and responsive to Toronto's Black communities?
Responsiveness. Does the initiative conduct ongoing checks to ensure flexibility from the feedback from Black communities?
This past year we did 61 engagements internally focused with about 2,500 staff engaged at these events. And then we did 53 external community engagements with about 3,500 people engaged, all that in just 1 year.
My most memorable moment is when we had the Symposium for Black queer youth and service providers, and the turnout was impressive. The event was beautiful, and just bringing this youth to a place where they can sit down and talk about their issues, to a place where they feel safe, lifting up voices of trans, queer, Black women, and making that voice the voice of the work that we do was really impressive for me.
But I found the gathering for the recognition of the International Decade to be very powerful and important because of the way in which we were embarking on something that was very different. And it wasn't just forcing Blackness into a white space, but actually starting to transform this space in small but important ways where we could be our fullest self, even if just for that evening.
For me, the proudest thing is that we have been able to come through 1 year, the first year of being in the city, having Black people taking up space. We are in the very fiber of the city now. We're not just an add-on, we're in the fiber of the city. From the councillors, so the political arm, to the bureaucracy, knows us, knows our work, knows our intention, knows what we're doing, and is using us to advance Black people in the city. This is amazing.
I'm proud of our team. We have a super dynamic team. Aina-Nia always says that we're not supposed to say that we have the best team in the world, but I think we do. We have folks that have been dedicated to this work and will be dedicated to this work long after they're here. So I'm proud of the team, proud of the work we've done, and proud of the foundation we've set.
I describe it as a small but mighty unit because it doesn't consist of 658 people. It consists of 5 people. I am delighted at the fact that in recruiting the unit, they got people who were outspoken, people I'd often seen in the past as outspoken advocates in our Black communities in Toronto.
We have this 5-year action plan. It's now 2019, so we are officially in year 2, but we have these years ahead of us to effectively try to change the conditions of Black life.
This is life work for us. This is work of the ancestor for us. We have put a framework, we live this work from an Ubuntu perspective. We understanding that I am because you are because I am, is not just a statement, we actually live it in CABR.
I feel like we're planting seeds that are slowly starting to germinate with the youth and the civic engagement capabilities, the self-esteem that was built. It really just kind of solidified my confidence in government.
I hope that the population of Black Torontonians out there realize that this work belongs to them as well. So where we go, we hope that people take up whatever it is that we start and they continue with it. We're here to create partnerships. We're here to create lasting relationships with Black Torontonians.
This is like a life-changing moment and something I'll take with me forever.
I want to mention that the last young woman who spoke is one of our first interns, and so we had 2 interns. The first set of interns, one went on to law school. She's at ARCDO, so we're really proud. And the second one we placed in the city, so she has a permanent job in the city of Toronto now. We're working with our two other interns right now. They're listen, there's some brilliant Black people, eh? They're absolutely brilliant, and we have them working on different projects throughout the city, but also their focus is on CABR, and it is our intention to make sure that if they want to stay in the city, that we find a place for them in the city. And then we have our next set coming on, I think, in April. So we rotate every 5 months with the intention of making sure that our young Black folks get an opportunity that they deserve. I want to just take a moment to mention here that much of the work that we've done is about building partnerships with the community, with the academy, and we're not doing this work by ourselves. Clearly, we wouldn't be able to. So the partnership is very, very important. My hope is that when we leave here today, we will have a partnership with the U of T Anti-Racism and Cultural and Diversity group to make sure that we move forward. Our most recent initiative is on January 29th. We partnered with Taibu, a community health center focused on Black health and wellness, for the second the second anti-Black racism public campaign. And this time we're focused on mental health. I want to show you, if you have, are we able to see that? I want to show you one of the bus sheds. So they're in 175, 76, Mo is here so he knows better. 175 or 76 bus sheds across Toronto has these signs. This is just one of them I want to show you. And so it's important that I promote this, and I'll tell you why. Because the City of Toronto, the mayor has declared March 2nd, this March 2nd, and every March 2nd going forward, the Toronto Black Mental Health Day. And so we have just begun. And on March 2nd, we will have, there's lots of stuff. Mo, can you stand up and say hi to everybody? Mo is our policy brain in the shop, and Mo is leading this particular work. And so lots and lots, just stay in touch with we're online, so just check it out. But remember, Black people, March 2nd is Black Mental Health Day because we deserve it. And I don't need to talk about why we deserve it. So we'll have a table. Our intention is to convene a table of system players such as CAMH, Toronto Public Health, Ministry of Addictions and Mental Health, and community service providers such as Taibu to look at effectively addressing mental health in the Black community. We also have another initiative I want to make mention of, which is called Growing in Place. And Growing in Place is about addressing gentrification and displacement of Black people in this city. We are working with the city planning division to do this, and we're starting at Jane and Finch and Eglinton West. I could go on forever, but please check out our website. Lots of this information is there. We also have our Black Lives Getting Better Together in partnership with Black Cap and Soy, Sherburne Soy, for youth. Supporting our youth, thank you. And this is about identifying and addressing the issues of Black, queer, and trans youth in the city. And I want to also just mention to you that when a people's food system can be controlled, you can control them, right? And so I often say that as when we were enslaved people, we were able to create some of the best dishes from scrap, yeah? Because we would take the enslavers' leftovers. We would take the scrap of the meat and we would create all these dishes. They're delicious, many of them well world-renowned, right? However, these food have been killing us and are killing us. And so we want to take back the control of our food. So one of our initiatives is our Black food sovereignty. Our intention is that we will have a Black food incubator in Toronto within the next 18 months, because we must look at food security and food insecurity, more food insecurity and food sovereignty for our folks, yes? And then Black youth in tech, so sharing some pieces with you that we consider addressing the actions in the plan, but also making sure that there's sustainability. And so Black youth in tech, artificial intelligence is the way forward, we know that. So we're making sure that we're supporting our youth to access opportunities, such as Collision, the Collision conference that just ended, and our Black Tech Conference. We also have a Mayor's Roundtable for those of you who are business people in here, where there is a quarterly meeting with the mayor and deputy mayor that is responsible for economic development to look at economic development for people specifically around business. And Black community and other levels of governments and municipalities across North America is telling us that CABR is creating a new standard and a new way to address anti-Black racism. As I said before, much of our work is about consultation. People want to know how we got here. People want to know how we're staying here. I want to tell you, as you well know, that much of our work is hard. We're trying to turn a dinosaur, people. We're trying to change system within the belly of the system. And so it's hard work. So what I would say to you is, if you are thinking about this and are thinking about moving forward in your institution, in your organization, know that part of the work has to be about getting people on your team that are grounded in their own Blackness, that are grounded in themselves, and that we are creating an atmosphere that helps them to stay grounded. Because understand, we're getting hit from the system inside, we're getting hit outside, we're getting hit from our own people, we're getting hit from other people, and if we're not grounded in ourselves and in this work and in what we're doing, we will die. So it is important, as you build a system to address anti-Black racism, that you have the right people on board and that you keep them healthy. I'm going to get going. Is that my 5-minute sign? That's my 10-minute sign? 5-minute sign, so I'm going to get going. I also want to mention that we're working with Eva's Place to make sure that we have a Black, trans, queer and trans focus space in our shelters. Because our Black, queer, and trans folks, if you think the rest of us are marginalized or anybody else is marginalized, we are the queer and trans youth are the most marginalized. And so we have to work with partners to make sure that we're taking care of all our youth, not just some. I'm moving through here. We are challenged to support Black staff. So I want to talk about some of the challenges that we have. We're challenged to support Black staff in the everyday microaggression that they face within their work. Black staff within the city, but Black staff across the city in different spaces. We're challenged by not just, often we say if we get more resources, that would help. We want more resources, and we've asked in this last budget for 2 additional folks. But I think beyond the resources, we need support in partnerships. We need partnership within the city and outside of the city. We need people to not be so quiet. We need people to call us and say, how can we support you? And let us help you support us. That's what we need more than anything else. We need all levels of government to recognize and take action on addressing anti-Black racism. We are ensuring that we're continuously evaluating our work, that we're learning from our work, that we're going back and addressing what we may have missed. We're making sure that we are hearing from community and how we are impacting them. And if we're not, what can we do to make sure that that happens? Because we are here for that. We are here for community, as you heard in the video. This is not a job for us. Every single person that enters this unit understand that this is a calling, because there's absolutely not enough money that anybody could pay us to do the work that we're doing. And so it has to be a calling. Now, Harriet Tubman, and denouncing the 19th century movement to return Black people to Africa, said, whites have brought Black people here to do their drudgery, and now they're trying to root them out and send them back to Africa. But they can't do it. We're rooted here, and they can't pull us up. We keep saying that about CABR. We're rooted here, and they can't pull us up. But we need you to make sure that they don't pull us up. I want to use the next few minutes, I may have 3 minutes left, that you've taken out of your day to talk about, to remind me of our resilience, of the significant differences that we have made through struggle and brilliance and the work we still must do on our way to liberation. We must remember Black people. We must remember who we are in spite of the challenges. We must remember how we have come through. And we must talk about our history, of course, but remember how we have come through. Only 3 years after the end of enslavement on paper, Lucille and Thornton Blackburn established the first cab company in Canada. Their logo informed TTC logo. During the 1850s, there were more than a dozen businesses on King Street, the very street that we were sold on. Then in the 1800s and early 1900s, descendants like Albert Jackson and William Hubbard were known to be the first civil servants in Canada. Please remember. The word remember means to put our members together, to put our pieces together. Remember who you are. And through all of this, it was Black people power that got us where we are. Over 400 years of Black presence in Canada. Yet we continue to rise in spite of. I want you to take care of yourselves. I want you, as you do the work, to take good care of yourself. While you support Black people and other people who are marginalized, take care of yourself. You are African people filled with wisdom and resourcefulness and resilience. But you need to take care of yourself. And I'll leave you with one of my favorite ARCDO lords. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation. And it is an act of political warfare. Take care of yourself, my people. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Aina-Nia, for a riveting presentation and the call to action to increase our efforts in addressing anti-Black racism. But most importantly, thank you for the reminder to remember who we are and where we come from. You gave me goosebumps. Thank you. At this time, I would like to invite the moderator and panelists to situate themselves at the front of the room as we transition to our panel discussion. I would like to invite those of you here and joining us online to stand if you are able to do so and engage in a great big stretch. Everyone stand. All right. Stretch, yes. Now turn to your neighbor, introduce yourself. All right? And share one thing. And share one thing that resonated with you from the keynote. So we'll chat for about 1 to 2 minutes. The moderator for today's event is Dr. Maydianne Andrade. Professor Andrade earned her PhD in neurobiology and behavior at Cornell University and is a professor in the Department of Biological Sciences at the University of Toronto Scarborough and ecology and evolutionary biology at the St. George campus. A Canada Research Chair in Integrative Behavior Ecology from 2007 through 2018, Professor Andrade's fundamental research has a primary focus on the evolution of behavior and species diversity. Since 2010, she has also been engaged in knowledge translation with respect to the effects of unconscious bias on fair assessment and career progression in academia. As inaugural chair and co-founder of TIDE, Toronto Initiative for Diversity and Excellence, she has educated a group of faculty who now provide education about unconscious bias to academic and staff leaders and search committees across the Tri-Campus with the endorsement of the provost. She was awarded the 2019 Ludwig and Estelle Just Memorial Human Rights Prize by the University of Toronto's Alumni Association in recognition of the impact of her work. As acting vice principal, academic, and dean of UTSC, and in her ongoing role as Vice Dean Faculty Affairs and Equity at UTSC since January 2017, Professor Andrade works to promote the hiring, retention, and success of a diverse and inclusive faculty at UTSC. Please join me in a warm welcoming of Dr. Andrade.
Thank you very much, Martina, and thank all of you for being here and for inviting me to this event. I'm privileged to be on a panel with these folks and to have just heard the inspiring words that I did hear. My own work flips on its head a saying that used to hang on my grandmother's wall. You may have heard the prayer for serenity. Grant me, I won't say the whole thing, but I'll tell you the version that I prefer, which is Angela Davis's version. I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I'm changing the things I cannot accept. I think that influences a lot of my work and those in this room. I'm privileged to introduce today the members of our panel. First, Michael Jr. Samakayi. Michael is a deaf community advocate who often works with deaf youth. He talks about issues surrounding racism, ableism, sexism, classism, and a heightened stigma around mental health within the community itself. He's also the Vice President Equity at the University of Toronto's Students' Union, where he is the first deaf person to be on the executive. And I think that actually requires a handshake. He's also a fourth-year student from Woodworth College, specializing in political science. Next, I would like to invite on my far right, your far left, Mairi McKenna Edwards. Mairi is the coordinator of diversity and inclusion training in student life at the University of Toronto. She brings hope to difficult conversations with an appreciation for levity and play, to keep in mind that at the heart of this work is increasing the connections between us. Her work draws on her own lessons coming from a mix of ethno-racial identities, Jamaican and Irish, to recognize both the commonalities between us as well as the particularities of our different experiences in the world. Mairi has worked in and run community-based programs for children, youth, and families in the Toronto area, taught and managed programs in higher education, and been a private consultant. She predominantly focuses on anti-oppression principles, anti-racism, practicing solidarity with other communities, and prioritizing the development of community. Mairi McKenna Edwards. And then finally, I would like to introduce Dr. Andrew Campbell, who has the wonderful name of Dr. ABC. He's a graduate of the University of Toronto with a PhD in Educational Leadership, Policy, and Diversity. He's presently a faculty member in the Master of Teaching program at the University of Toronto, OISE, and an adjunct assistant professor at Queen's University Online. He's an Ontario certified teacher and has been an educator for over 25 years in Jamaica, the Bahamas, and in Canada. He's authored 2 books, Teachable Moments with Dr. ABC, A Spoonful for the Journey, and The Invisible Student in the Jamaican Classroom. His research and teaching focus on issues of equity, diversity, inclusion, leadership, LGBTQ issues, and teacher performance evaluation, and I understand that many of his students are in the room today. Please join me in welcoming. So I will be posing a couple of questions before we turn this over for interaction with you here in the audience. And I'd like to start by asking Andrew Campbell to tell us, in his opinion, how is the Black identity currently understood? And what stories are missing from the present discourse, community conversations, and movements to end anti-Black racism?
Thank you so much, and good morning again to everyone. Just want to say thanks, Jody, for creating this space for us for celebration and symbolism. I was talking to Marty this morning, talking about, sometimes we get tired of these kind of settings and events and one-off 3-hour sessions on a Black History Month, but I just want to let people understand that these symbolism, these simple symbolism, they are very important, and a part of any organization is symbolism and structure. So don't be weary in saying, oh, we're doing Black History Month thing. We have to do the Black History Month thing. It is important. And with that being said, I think one of the stories for me that is missing is, and of course, the term is very nuanced still, Black excellence. I was speaking to someone yesterday who said she didn't like the term because it's very limited still in saying Black excellence. But I think Black excellence is still being played in what I call limited edition. And that is what I think the story is missing. The visibility of Black excellence, I think, is missing. We think about a place like University of Toronto, where I consider a sighting of a Black professor like myself is rare and an endangered species. So it's almost like, wow, that's a Black professor. Wow, he has an accent. Wow, and being on the campus for just over a year now, in the day, it's something else because many of my students, I'm still being surprised when I realize I am still their first Black professor. And I said, you had undergrad for how many years? 3 years, 4 years, and I'm your first Black professor? So when I walk into school, you may see me sometimes with my energy is almost like a peacock. I spread my feathers open. It's because I feel still like an endangered species. And that is what is missing. That excellence is missing from our stories. And so for me, myself, I came to University of Toronto in 2009 to do my PhD. And I'm going to surprise you, 5 years of study, and I had 1 Black professor for 1 semester. 5 years of study. How are we going to change? We're on the grounds of the University of Toronto. We cannot not associate and say to the University of Toronto, what is your responsibility? What is a university's responsibility? We talk about Black resilience. I'm very big on resilience, but sometimes you have to also push back and to say, why do I have to be resilient? Why do I have to always want to fight? Why don't you open the door and open the gate and the windows and all the different things that you open for other persons to let me in? And so for me, the missing story is a representation of what is beautiful. I say to my students, and I know I have 2 minutes, I have 30 more seconds. I say to my students all the while, the reason why I dress up so much to go to school, even when I teach kindergarten, is because I want the little Black boys and little Black girls to see a different picture. Because most time when they see a Black man on TV, he's either been arrested, he's either leaning over a police car, and he's either, doing something else. I want them to see a different picture because we are lacking in that. So the story that I'm talking about is the story of the Black resilience, the Black representation. And I myself, you yourself, all of us who work in academia over here, we are that story. Every time you walk onto the campus, you are that story, and it's constant. And so for me, I think that is what is missing, more of us. And I hope that soon and very soon, I won't have students saying to me, you are my first Black professor, and students saying to me, I finished 5 years of study, and you were my only Black professor. So we have to move that story. That's what I want to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. I'd like to turn next to Michael and ask about his opinion of Black identity, how it's understood, and what's missing from those conversations.
Oh, I don't know if I can use that mic. I think I'm going to use American Sign Language and sign. That's going to be a much faster way for me to communicate, if you don't mind. Really, I agree what you, Andrew, just said about what's missing in terms of representation. Black History Month can be any month. It should be any month. When we talk about representation, I think about myself and being here at the university. I'm one of the very few deaf students here at the university. And in terms of my story, when I meet people, they say, oh, you're deaf. How are you doing it? And I feel that issue of representation, it's missing. The stories of success. So I constantly have to assure and reassure people that I can participate, that I can be out there. So I can show people that I'm deaf, I'm Black, there's that intersectionality, but I am capable and I meet different people, and it's important for them to realize and to know. The university is a big place, and there are very few students that look like me, very few students that identify as deaf and Black. And so it's that constant trying to get that recognition for the skills that I actually do have. And I think the university should be more encouraging and welcoming of students that look like me for that representation.
Thank you very much. These are heavy words. They're affecting me. I'd like to next turn to Mairi and to ask how Black identity is understood from your perspective, and what's missing.
Oh, that's in 3 minutes. I want to contextualize what I'm going to say. I'm a settler on this land, and so I want to contextualize everything I say within that. I'm going to talk about essentialism. And the way that I'm going to, I'll start with myself, and then I'll talk about how that shows up in terms of conversations with students on campus. So I've spent a lot of time in my life in the space in between, in the confused moment when people look at me and they can't quite figure out how to interact with me until they figure out what's just, you're touched, but how? What is it? Right? And so, I've had a lot of time to think about how I fill that in. So growing up, I'm biracial, I'm a Black-white mix, whatever that means. I have light skin. I grew up with a very well, my hair was longer, but actually it was more wider. I had a larger afro. I had one before I had kids. And so there was this not fitting into either one of the spaces available. But beyond that, I was transracially adopted. So I was adopted by white parents, and I grew up in a predominantly white environment. And so I also didn't have the cultural cues in terms of what was perceived in the box of essentialized blackness. And then the identities that were available to me, for example, were athlete. Well, I had chronic health problems and in and out of the hospital, and so, no. And then there was rap. I assure you that's not my skill set. So and there's this series of identities that were offered in terms of the box that I complicated and just didn't fit into. But I was simultaneously also living in an environment where our local KKK chapter met regularly and was completely aware of that. So I was also having the experience of discrimination in my regular life, but outside of conversation and it being shared. So the thing that's interesting for me is that that's my 1 minute. So the thing that's interesting to me about this is that it actually gave birth to the privilege, the array of privileges that I occupy, to redefine and to really poke at what the box was and who got to draw that box, and even how we're reacting and responding to and resisting the box, and who's still, colonialism, setting the conditions for that. Fast forward to my work here on the university. One of the things that's really quite moving to me about my work here is how many students, staff, and faculty search me out for conversation about how they are dealing with that box of what is blackness, but not just blackness. The various essentialized identities that they're consistently being asked to respond to and be pushed into. And I'm deeply privileged and very moved by the stories that people have shared with me and asked me to be in conversation with them about that. And I think one of the things I want to say about that is that I think we're yet again in another moment where we are asking and forcing us to deal with that box of this is what it is to be, because part of the conversations that folks are having with me is, how do I deal with the charge of, if you were really black, you would be doing it this way? And so the unity and the conversation and the healing that comes from the relationship and the oneness. So my answer is that to both how we're identifying it and what I think is missing is that we're still dealing with those essentialized identities, even as we understand and think about intersectionality and this more broader way of identifying in terms of empirical research. We're still dealing with it, and the impact of breaking us, our unity.
I find these topics challenging also because I am a biologist, and if you think there's few black professors in the humanities and social sciences, welcome to the sciences. I'll give you one bit of insight from the sciences that resonates with what you're all saying, which is, if I were to look at the genes of the people in this room, many of us have a couple of traits that make people put us in a bucket, right? And those few traits are not related to our other traits. We could walk across campus to a room that looks very different in terms of the visible traits, and we might have more in common with people in that room than we do with people in this room for those other things that make up our identity, our preferences, our talents. And that's what people have such a hard time understanding. And that's the box that we're being put into. It's people's reaction to the few things they see, as opposed to anything about us as people. So I thank you. The science side, the social science side, the humanities side all together. I'll move on to the next question. And for the second question, I will ask Michael if he could speak first. And I'm going to ask, what has been the relationship between your identities and your journey through this environment, navigating spaces of leadership, employment, learning environment, where often you are the only one? What tools have supported this navigation, and what lessons have you learned?
Yes, thank you for asking. I feel like I have two identities. One's visible and one's not so visible. I don't think people can necessarily see. Oftentimes when I meet different kinds of people, someone that I've never met before, people will ask me, which institution do you attend? I say, well, first of all, I'm from Africa. And people say, well, oh, okay. So I've had the opportunity to attend university here. There are not many
opportunities for deaf people in Africa, which is one of the reasons why I came here. The education system is different. There are very limited opportunities. And so for me, coming here as an international student of African background who's deaf, it's a very different experience navigating this very hearing-centered university environment. And I think, well, where's my community? Where are the people that I connect with most? There are not many here that I can really identify with. So in terms of resources, I think that's very important to help me navigate this space. Naturally, I have friends outside of the university community. I am participating in different clubs and organizations, so that's how I make my connection and navigate this space.
Human side is always the critical connection side. Thank you. Next, I'd like to turn to Mairi and ask the same question. How has it been navigating this space? We heard a bit about it, but what makes you so successful in this space?
That's interesting. So like 20 years ago, I'm sitting in a lecture hall at York University. It's my undergrad. Yeah, 20. Daniel Yon, second year anthropology class. It's our theory class. So he's just come back to teaching undergrad. It's been a while. He was teaching grad studies. Our brains are like sweating. I'm in the front row with my friends. A couple of the guys are at the back. And he comes to the front of the lecture hall and he says something like, along the lines of, it's come to my attention that some of you are really having trouble, that you're not understanding, and your sense of, your very sense of the world is feeling like it's being shaken. There's like a long pause. He leaned into the lectern and he said, good. There's just a slight smile, and he just went on with the lecture. And third year anthropology, Malcolm Blinko, we went to class, we did our reading, we showed up ready to go, and he said, okay, go into groups and tell us what's important. We were like, what, aren't you gonna lecture? Aren't you gonna tell us what to think? He said, no, you're gonna tell us what to think. We didn't know what to do. And these thoughts were in my mind recently because I've had these conversations with students just this week about how the experience of having what you know so profoundly shaken, but then given the tools and the encouragement to put that world back together, to redefine that identity on your own. And so now in my auntie years, as I call it, I think back and I think about the responsibility to be my version, as all our speakers this morning have talked about, and I was so moved by the words this morning about being really clear and telling my story of how I came to be so clear about where my identity is, without apology, and to be grateful and to be clear about creating the spaces that we've just heard my colleagues and friends talk about, to have more spaces for folks to have the experience of seeing themselves reflected, the possibilities opened up, and the tools to redefine yet again how that will happen. And that, again, I think the most subversive thing I do here on campus is I bring people together to have really tricky, honest conversations.
Finally, I'd like to, Andrew, the last word before we start hearing from the audience.
Yeah. Thank you. So the three parts: navigate, tools, and the lesson. And I think it seemed like what you just said, Marty, about being on a campus like University of Toronto, being here, you're constantly being measured. And I think what for me, that navigation is, for me, is to unpack that measuring and step away from that ruler. So for instance, if you say you're good by whose standard? It's always the white man's standard. And so I find myself leaning against, and I have to do this. I'm just like, school teacher, elementary school. Every time something happens, we find ourselves, we do this. there was a good lecture professor, you do this. That was a very good chapter, you do this. And we constantly, what I've been doing is stepping away from that ruler. I've stepped away from that ruler. So for me, I bring my whole self to school. And something as simple as what you wear, I like clothes, as what you wear. I have been to spaces where I take out something and I said, I'm going to wear this, and something says, no. That's going to do too much Jamaica. That's going to give too much Africa. They're going to ask if you're from Africa. Put back that chain. That's one chain, one chain is enough. And you keep on policing yourself to make sure when you step in a room, you present what I call the palatable black. Because people want you, but they want you the way they want you. And most times when they want you as the dessert or the appetizer. What I've been doing is presenting myself as the main course. I have always presented. So even when I walk into my classrooms, I used to remember 3 years ago when I used to just started working online for Queens or teaching, I used to always introduce myself. My name is Dr. Andrew B. Campbell, and I have a PhD from University of Toronto, that kind of stuff. And then somebody will ask you, you'll get the question from a student, where you get your PhD from, and what you have to do is to keep unpacking and introducing yourself, to be legitimate, to be good enough. So I would always say, I did my PhD at University of Toronto part-time, and I was the second person to defend my thesis. And so saying that gives me more credibility. And then I would say, actually, I didn't get a scholarship. I paid every cent for my PhD. And that gives you more value. I've stopped doing that. So when I walk into a classroom, I say, my name is Dr. Andrew B. Campbell. You can call me Dr. ABC, or you can call me Sir. I'm done. So that's what I do. I don't have to always pour on, because what we've been doing, a lot of us has been doing it, even the space. What we do, we make ourselves less so people could feel more. We make ourselves less. So my friend advised me the other day on a New Jersey train not to speak, Andrew, you're tall, you're 6'4", you're wearing 2-inch boots. You have to make yourself a little bit smaller. So that lady, and it's something really happened, I'll tell you about that another day, could feel safe. And I said, I'm not going to be less for her to feel safe. So I present my whole self. And I can tell you, it's a lot for people to take on. And it shouldn't be so much for people to take on. When I come into a passageway, I come off the elevator, they'll go, because it's like, who is he? And it's different. It's a different kind that I've never seen. And so for me, I keep on bringing my whole self. And I say to especially the younger black people in the audience, you have to do that, because as you constantly taking away pieces of yourself, you're going to wake up one day and not recognize who you are. And it comes from that self-care that you talk about. That comes from that powerful statement you talk about, self-care. So I'm taking care of myself by presenting my whole self. And the tool I use is being authentic and to tell my truth. Because telling stories is one thing, but telling the truth is another thing. And so I tell my truth. And then the final thing is, what lesson have I learned from this? And the lesson is, I am enough. It may take some of us a while, but I'm finally there where I am enough. I am son for my mother. I am brother for my sister. I am neighbor to where I live. I am professor for my student. I am enough. And I close off this one because we grew up from our ancestors, that drum, that singing, that humming. I hear it all the time. It's from the black church, and we get that from church. So I'll close this part by just giving a story about an analogy about church. Why I pulled that whole idea of being enough. I grew up in a old black Pentecostal church where the mothers of Zion sit on the front bench and they're all in white dress. So none of you could sit on the front bench because none of you wearing full white. You're not holy enough, okay? And so, and what I find, those mothers of Zion, they didn't have the words that we have. They didn't have the PhD and the masters and the bachelors and the certificate. They had nothing, but they had soul and they had knowledge. And when they couldn't find words to describe the goodness of God that they were experiencing, I'm going to leave you with the one line they would say, because they didn't have the qualifiers and the quantifiers and the adjectives, but they would they'll try to testify, and then they would, when they couldn't find enough words, they'll just say, "He's altogether wonderful." So I want to leave that with you as black people who think about yourself. When you look in the mirror, let nobody tell you you're proud or you're show off or you're too much. You look in the mirror. When I look in the mirror at myself, I go, okay. Okay. So you have to, and that's a part of that self-care that our keynote speaker talk about. But you have to understand that you are indeed wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Am I the only one that has goosebumps in here? Come on now. All right. At this time, we will be opening the discussion to the community. We'll begin by posing the following question to the panelists. Where do we go from here?
I was wondering if we could start with Michael and then maybe open it up to the community. We're here for the students. He is a student, and he has a lot to tell us, I think, about where he thinks we should go from here.
So where do we go from here? Well, I got distracted, sorry about that, or just saw something in the audience that let me back up here. So I think that, we all have different experiences and backgrounds, and we need to recognize those differences and the different stories that are out there. And allow those differences to exist, support one another, and have that human connection. And we can do that through empathy. So where do we go from here? It's important to have that human connection. So that's the note I'd like to end off on.
So I think we would open it up for questions, comments, ruminations. We have a lot more we could say, but it feels unbalanced. Who's going to be heading to the city of Toronto? Ah, perfect.
Thank you so much. My name is Henry Sally. First of all, I would like to thank Jody and the organizing committee for putting together this amazing symposium. And the panel for the exciting and illuminating ideas that you have shared, the encouragement, the inspiration. Would you talk more about gentrification within the workplace?
Gentrification. So when you say gentrification within the workplace, this is the challenge with not being able to bring our whole self?
Yeah.
Because there's a certain model that's expected, perhaps? Small earrings, black and gray. I haven't absorbed that. I don't know if folks have something they want to say about that.
Oh, okay, I'll go first. I'll tell you what's coming up for me when I think about the gentrification is that I think I'm mindful of how there has been a move in the university and the academies to encourage, welcome, draw in a diverse population of students. What I'm mindful of is what the university is and is not doing to be worthy of that, of our brilliance, possibility, and wonderfulness, and what has to happen to allow that to thrive. And I'm saying allow, acknowledging power systems. I think that, and I think that there's a lot of immediacy around. I have the privilege of being in conversation with a lot of staff. The department that I work with just went through like a workplace kind of survey, a climate study, and one of the points, this piece about the cost of who I have to be here, and the cost of wanting to be here and the university wanting me to be here because of my connections, because of my identity, but then creates dynamics where my relationship with my community is then at risk, because what I'm then asked to do to go back into my community puts that at risk. So I think that there's some really difficult, painful conversations at every level, and I think that part of the conversation is at every single level of the university. At every single level, what are we thinking and doing about this? So to be really pragmatic, in my work, my family and I have a plan for if I get fired. because that's the cost of my work. And that if I'm going to do this, I'm going to leverage the white privilege that I enjoy in certain spaces. If I am going to, leverage the education, the various privileges that I have, cis privilege, that is a very real reality. And so for me, my way of coming to that is through that kind of that tension. And I'm mindful of how many of my colleagues, when I said that, were really shaking their head. I see you.
For me, thank you so much for that. And for me, that idea is that everybody wants to increase diversity. Everybody. I mean, one of the exercises I give to my student is to go online and just pull diversity and equity statements from organization. And they pull them from universities to places like Red Bull, to places like Sephora. Like, you'd be surprised what is written in equity and diversity statements. Yeah. And I feel like somebody just got up one day out of bed, drink a cup of coffee and said, let me just write a statement. And they put all those beautiful words, inclusion and equity and sustainability and all that kind of stuff. And it means nothing because we're in the constant of checking the boxes. And you have one black professor, you check the box. You have one person who's deaf here, so you check the box. Oh, this person is transgender, so you check the box. And we are very big on that we have done the work. But the whole idea of gentrification is that, but we want a certain type. They want a certain type. So even though in a space like ours, we got an email the other day, and they were doing some work among our MT students, and the email I got, a line of it says, we realize that not all our MT students are, a certain group of our MT students are experiencing the program in a different way. And I said, okay. Go figure. Because you may bring in those students and they're sprinkling. You look in our groups, you have 33 students, 32 persons in a class, one black student, 32, 2 black students, 33, 1 black student. And so there's a burden. And when you teach certain topics, it's a burden on that one black student to represent all black people. And so what I constantly say, there are many ways to be black and there are many different kinds of black. And so those kind of pressure is placed on the one person. Those kind of loads are placed on the one person. And so for me, I think that is something that institutions need to think about, that we have to move. You can start a token. Absolutely, you have to start there. Somebody has to be the first. But 5 years after, we still have the one person. 6 years after, we still have 2 persons. Where are we moving? How are we moving to a level where people don't feel displaced? You put me in an institution, but I remain there and I feel displaced. So I think that's the work that needs to be done when it comes to inclusion in the workplace that we like to speak about.
Can I just ask first if Michael wanted to speak to that, or?
Sure. I think I agree with most what everyone said. I think if you're working in a company and they talk about inclusion, that whole idea of checking the boxes, you want more. You want to make sure that you have that diversity and representation. I think you need to make sure that you're safe in your workplace, that you can feel safe. And if you have more diversity and you have that support, then you do feel safe.
Thank you so very much for the sharing of your knowledges and wisdom this morning. Over the past few months, I've been thinking quite a bit around healing and restoration. With the profound acknowledgement as racism as violence that creates trauma. And so I was wondering if I could hear some of your thoughts around what are the tools, the resources, how do we restore ourselves after our encounters with violence?
I'll just say one thing briefly to start with. I'm not always comfortable with the language of equity. I do come from this background that is very other to this world, although I've learned it. But I will say, again, it resonates with the truths that I have experienced. And one of those is, especially for the allies in the room, some of the restoration and some of the healing comes from an ally saying, yeah, I saw that. Yeah. You shouldn't have had to experience that. I've been in many meetings where it's clear people can't hear me. And all it took was one white colleague to say afterwards, sorry.
It's weird. I think, so yesterday, something happened to me yesterday. Tanita is right there. Thank you, Tanita Monroe. I love what I do. I enjoy teaching. 24 years, love it. When I'm coming to school, I'm still excited, and that's a blessing. And yesterday, not in an anti-discriminatory class, in a research class, a student asked a question. And I'm jolly, I'm teaching, I'm very animated, you could see. And a student asked a question, and literally the question hit me like this. And I'm standing in front of 33 students, and I'm trying to answer the question. And I couldn't believe it. And I said this openly, and I said this publicly. The first time in 24 years of teaching, yesterday I asked permission of my 33 students to step out the room for 2 minutes. I have never stepped out the room in my life to gather myself. Never. The question was very loaded, very contextual, and very microaggressive, and actually aggressive. It talks about language, accent, immigrant. And as a teacher, any student know me that I will teach and I will skip from language to languages. And Canadian English is just about one way of saying English. It's not the standard, it's one standard way of speaking. And I use my Jamaican dialect. I'm very proud of that. I grew up in a house where my parents did not have passed a grade 9 education, but they sent me to good school. Hey. And so I honor that. When I speak to my mom on the phone, I speak to her in the Jamaican dialect. I honor that. She don't want to try to figure out what her son is saying who has a PhD. I speak to her like I speak to my mama. Yes, mommy. No, mommy. I just come from school. I just wake up, make her drink my tea. That's how I speak to her. And I honor that. When I walk into the class and I'm excited, I will go skip from that to that. And I even put a little Spanish in there sometimes because I like to say hola. And yesterday I was challenged and I was questioned. And I could not believe what I experienced. And I can say to you that it took me a while to gather myself quickly, but it took me longer than I anticipated to feel better. So I said to myself, I know, I've been through this before in the streets, called gay, Jamaican slur for homosexual, Batiman. I've been through that. So it normally give me about 3 to 4 hours of catching myself. It took about 7 o'clock. I still didn't feel better about 7 p.m. And I questioned myself like, hey, come on, it's 7 p.m. Come on, get back to who you are. And what I had to do is what you said, to take care of myself. I had to realize that yesterday, that was bad. But in the day, what happened to me was bad. It was aggressive. And I have to be okay and be quiet in taking care of myself. So for me, I circle the big word here, teach. I am called to teach. And so for me, that restoration, that liberation comes from my gift. My gift is teaching. I'm one of the few persons who my gift meets my work, but I'm called to teach. It's a gift that I have. And so for me, I can do many things. I can demonstrate, I can block the street, I can do all of that kind of stuff. But I am a teacher. And so for me, with all my students, I have a bunch of students at the back, my white students who I know, they know where I go or I care for them. I will continue to sit with them and to sit with all my students and say, education is a part of liberation. It's a part of the process. And I am here to bring you through the process of cultural competence so you can grow, not for me, but for the little black boy out there that you're going to end up teaching. Because I've been TDSBs from 2011, and there's a lot of classroom filled with black kids, and the teacher is white. So my job is to prepare the next set of teachers, they're all in the room right now, to teach the next Andrew who is going to be in your grade 5, grade 6, grade 6 class.
That's my child. That's my child. I just want to call in some of the work that's being done around the world around this, that I'm just aware of. And I think it's demonstrated right here for us. I'm very affected by the work of Sean Ginwright in the African American theorist in the United States. Some of you may have read this, and this work around healing-centered theory and this response in terms of saying the ways of healing have still so often been defined by a colonial notion of what, like how we heal. We're ignoring that we've known for deep ancestry how to take care of each other before psychology existed, before psychiatry existed, before these models existed. And that we can have another way of thinking about how we heal. But I think that one of the things that moves me about Ginwright's work is that we recognize that we have had a shared experience, that we have been targeted because of our membership in a particular community. And so that healing then becomes profoundly important as that community, as this community, right? And so that having space to do that it cannot be said how important that is, because the person to call when it happens in a meeting, the person whose office you know you can go sit in, so that you don't have to wait until you leave. I think these models and talking about this is acknowledging that we are healing from a racial trauma, and some of the work being done around center racial trauma, healing against racial trauma, and that there's some models. I want to just acknowledge that there's some work and some ideas and some, to pull from, and that it all starts, I think, with acknowledging what we already have and going back to what was there already in our knowledge.
Sure, I can add something. I think of a situation that happened to a friend. Someone insulted them and they made a comment. Someone asked, I think it was an innocent question, but it was inappropriate. It was in front of a lot of people in a lecture hall and everyone laughed. And my friend stood up and said, it's not funny. It's not something to be laughed at, not something to be joked about. And then everyone apologized and said sorry, and the person who made the comment apologized and said sorry. And it was resolved. I think that oftentimes people don't necessarily know what they can say, what they should say. They sometimes avoid making comments or avoid even saying anything.
So I think it's learning how to interact appropriately with one another. It's not good enough to claim ignorance or, oh, I innocently said that, I didn't mean it. You have to go deeper than that and learn what is genuinely appropriate from the other person's point of view.
Thank you, everyone, for such a critical and riveting discussion. At this time, I would like to invite Jody Glean, Director of the Anti-Racism and Cultural Diversity Office, to close today's event.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to stick to script because I think if I was to go off script, there would be a lot of tears. I'd like to, on behalf of the Anti-Racism and Cultural Diversity Office staff at the Black History 365 Committee, I'd like to begin by expressing a sincere thank you to our keynote speaker, our participants in today's event, Dr. Joki Wan, and for our amazing panelists and MC moderators for contributing your time, knowledge, and resources. Many thanks to senior leadership here at the University of Toronto that allow for these events to happen, including President Gertler, Vice President Kelly Hannah Moffitt, and Executive Director of Equity, Karima Hashmani, who is here. I'd like to invite the members of the Black History 365 committee, if you're present here and able to do so, to please stand. Just stand and give a little wave. Listen to me, the work of the Anti-Racism Office as director and the staff, we're just the tools, the support, the leadership, the content knowledge around this particular event as it came together today came from the many voices around the table, and there'll be more information to come as it relates to this particular committee, and we're expanding. Don't you worry. There are some goals that have been expressed that will be met from these voices, but many voices around from community. And I'd like to take a moment to also acknowledge that there are members of this committee and stakeholders across the Tri-Campus who continuously engage in anti-Black racism work here within the University of Toronto. I've met some of you. Some of you are going to meet me very soon. And I just want to say thank you for the work that you do, for the work that may not be visible, for the work that I know that makes noise, for the work that I know may put us in the media. Thank you. Thank you so very much. Of course, I'd like to take this moment to thank the Human Resources and Equity Communications team, the work of Haley Fuller, Lisa Holmes, Alex Nathan, Tom Spencer, Will Campbell. There are many folks working behind the scene of which support the work of the committees and the Anti-Racism Office in making these days possible. And of course, to the many attendees joining us here in person, thank you for braving the beautiful weather outside, as well as those joining us online. Thank you for coming and participating in today's event. And of course, we'd like to also just put on your radar that the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, the pre-conference event will be held March 19th at the Scarborough campus, focusing on race, mental health, and community. And then the conference itself will be held on March 20th, where we're looking at anti-racism from conversation to action. My heart is full. My heart is full. Thank you so much. Have a great day.